Elijhah Badger might be gone, but the Sun Devils could still have a number one receiver with Jordyn Tyson.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications wherever you're getting your shows, and stay in touch by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs are finished, the sports just aren't sporting like they want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We have been kind of MIA recently, and if you can't tell, I've been sick as a dog. Can't shake this thing. So I am going to be powering through at this point. I thought that taking a few days off to feel better might be the trick. That was not the trick. So we're back. We're going to be full force 5 days a week starting today. So now's never been a better time to subscribe. And again, we're trying to get the podcast to 1,000 before the season starts. We are currently at 817 subscribers. I appreciate each and every one of you for subscribing. If you're on the fence, then let me tell you, we're going to keep you up to date on all the big stuff. So definitely hit that subscribe button. We're going to finish up our prediction series, which is where we're going to be at today. And then we got plenty more coming up here with training camp right around the corner. But to today's conversation, Jordyn Tyson, somebody that I hyped up a lot last year, only for him to not be able to play because he was recovering from a leg injury that he sustained at Colorado. He's back. He's 100% healthy for all intents and purposes, excuse me. This is about as high upside a receiver as the Sun Devils have had in the last several years. I look at Jordyn Tyson, and this is somebody that has so many just God-given talents with the size, the speed, the ability to stretch the field, catch the football, make a play once it's in his hands, special teams prowess. He's got a lot going on for him and a lot of very positive things that are going his way. And the Sun Devils need him now more than ever. Elijhah Badger, who was the team's number one receiver each of the last 2 seasons, is gone. He entered the transfer portal. He is now with Florida. There is a wide open spot right now for ASU to find their new number one receiver. And there's plenty of capable guys here. Guys that we're going to talk about, like Troy O'Mary, who will be the subject of tomorrow's show. We'll be talking about Jake Smith, Melcon Stovall, someone that I'm really high on. There's a lot of guys here that could be able to help you take that next step with Badger being gone. But Jordyn Tyson might be the key to taking that step forward, to having that true number one receiver. Today, we're going to be taking a look at his stats, receptions, receiving yards, touchdowns, and a little bit of miscellaneous stuff. Disclosure, when it comes to the snap prediction series, there are 3 stipulations. The first, this is based on the assumption that they are starting or in a very significant role. We are also not going to be accounting for injuries. I'm not going to predict a guy only plays 3 games. I'm not going to say that this guy is only going to be a number 5 receiver all year long. This is with the assumption this is either wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 or somebody that has a big role in the offense. Second, this is an individual preview. That means that another player's preview will not affect this one. So in this episode, we're going to be under the impression that Jordyn Tyson is wide receiver 1. But on tomorrow's episode, when we look at Troy O'Mary, we're going to be doing the same thing for him because he could also be wide receiver 1. So if I predict both of these guys to have a best case scenario of 1,400 yards, I am not saying that they're both going to be 1,400-yard receivers. It's just looking at them from an individual aspect. And then finally, we're looking at the best case scenario as the highs, the worst case scenario as the lows, and then the prediction that I have is my own prediction. It's what I believe they're going to end up doing this year. Let's start with yards. For Jordyn Tyson, this is somebody who doesn't have a ton of play time in his career. During his time at Colorado, he was able to get on the field for just about the whole year, played for 8 games before he went down with injury. In those 8 games, he caught 22 passes, 470 yards, 4 touchdowns. Explosive. Somebody that is very capable of breaking off a big play. In that year, he only had 5 catches twice. Every other time was less than that. But in those games where he had 5 catches, he went over 100 yards receiving and had at least a 58-yard catch. He's a beast. He's a stud. He is perceivably the most explosive player at the wide receiver position. Could be one of the most explosive players on offense, period. You factor in guys like Raleek Brown and Cameron Scadaboo, Jordyn Tyson's right there. It's just the pure God-given talent that he has, which is why with the receiving yards, I don't feel too shy about going on the higher end here. For a best-case scenario, I have written 1,100, but I am going to go down to 1,000. 1,000 yards is a lot. Elijhah Badger wasn't able to topple that in the last 2 years where he was the number 1 receiver. And of course, the quarterback play had a lot to do with that as well. But ASU hasn't had a 1,000-yard receiver since 2019 when Brandon Ayuk topped it. And Brandon Ayuk obviously is a very good wide receiver. Jordyn Tyson has the potential to be a very good receiver, but projecting him to be Brandon Ayuk, who was a first-round pick and is now one of the 10 best receivers in the NFL, that's not fair. Getting 1,000 yards is going to be tough for anybody, for him, for O'Mary, for any of the other receivers. But in a best-case scenario where he is the starting number 1 receiver and he is able to stay healthy and he's going to be able to get back to that potential of unlocking the big plays, I don't see any reason why he can't hit the 1,000-yard mark. I have 1,100. I'm changing to 1,000. I think 1,100 would be staggering for him, for any receiver on this offense. Low, and this is low, I'm going to say 400. And there's a few things that play into this with only catching 400 receiving yards. The first and the biggest is the fact that the quarterback situation is very much up in the air. We don't know what to anticipate with it. We've got Sam Levitt coming in, somebody who I think will be able to do enough offensively to get the offense moving. He's going to have a really good ground game to rely upon. There's enough weapons in the passing game to keep defenses honest. But you're also asking a guy who only played 4 games last year to come in and lead the offense. I don't know if that's realistic or fair to ask from him in year 1. Tyson could be on the losing end of that. They could end up going to a really spread out offense without a true number 1 receiver. After Elijhah Badger last year was 713 yards, the next closest was Jalen Conyers at 362 yards. And then the next closest receiver was Xavier Guillory at 226 yards. And he did the majority of that damage in the first half of the year. This is not a given or a guarantee that Jordyn Tyson is going to be wide receiver 1. This is projection on my part. If he is not wide receiver 1, if it is O'Mary, if it is Jake Smith, if it is whoever else, you may or may not have somebody that breaks out in that Elijhah Badger form for 700 yards, for 800, 900, 1,000 yards. Worst case scenario here, 400 yards. End of the day, if you get like 3 or 4 guys that contribute 400 yards, I don't think that's a horrible situation to be in as long as the run game really takes off. It's going to be a challenging year through the air. Jordyn Tyson's still capable, though, which is why my prediction for him overall is going to be 700 yards. 700 yards, that puts him right next to what Elijhah Badger did last year and what Elijhah Badger did the year previous, where he recorded 866 yards. I don't know that Tyson is ready to be a 1,000-yard receiver in his first full year for the Sun Devils. The potential's there. It's absolutely there. The ceiling, it's not quite limitless, but it feels pretty darn high for a guy like Jordyn Tyson. You're still asking him to take a huge role on coming off a year where he didn't even play. And it's a new offense. Marcus Arroyo replaces Beau Baldwin. It's year 2 of Kenny Dillingham. It's a brand new quarterback. There's a lot of changes to this team. This is a very high upside receiver. I could envision a situation where he does end up recording 1,000 yards, but it might not be on a lot of catches. And we'll talk about the catches in just a moment. That's where we're going to head to next. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to talk to you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. I love sports, and I love them so much that I just don't want them to stop. But the playoffs are done, and we're getting fewer games. And sports just aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app, dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Wherever you get your podcasts, hit like, hit subscribe, turn on notifications wherever you're getting your podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. A shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. And again, if you have not subscribed on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Help us get to 1,000 views before 1,000 subscribers before the season starts. If you're on the fence, this is your sign. Back into our conversation, talking about potential receptions for Jordyn Tyson. And this is going to be a really interesting conversation, in my opinion, for Jordyn Tyson. He was not heavily involved in his first year with the Colorado Buffs. His last 2 games, he did catch 5 catches in each of those games, and he clips 1,000 yards in each of them. Before that, though, week 1, 2 catches. Week 2, 1 catch. 2 catches, 1 catch, 3, and 3. Then he got 5 in back-to-back games. Then he was injured, and we didn't see him the rest of the year. They slowly got him more involved, for sure, and he had tons of big plays. In those games, he had a 23-yard catch, a 31-yard catch, a 42-yard catch, 2 58-yard catches, an 81-yard catch. There is tons of big play potential here from Jordyn Tyson, but it's also a very, very, very small sample size. Going on the higher end here on receptions, it still feels pretty difficult to throw that out there. In fact, I have in my notes 75. I'm going to knock that down too. And I think that 65 is probably best case. And even then, that's a lot. Elijhah Badger in 2022 had 70 and last year had 65. This is basically plugging him into that role. In fact, I'm going to knock it down again and I'm going to go to 60. It's a lot of catches that you would be asking out of Tyson to be able to record. And this is also an offense that I don't know if they're going to throw the ball at a high volume and at a high rate. You've got such a good run game. The offensive line is bolstered up. You probably need to play to your strength of running the football a little bit more aggressively would be the word. This is still a a offense that will get a receiver involved. I don't know if there's if this is the year, at least, where we see one guy that's just truly the number one receiver. And again, we'll talk about at the end of the podcast why I think Tyson could be, but there's a lot to ask there. 65 to 60 catches is going to be the best case scenario. Worst case, 25. I think that he's right about what he did his first year, but it's really spread out. And you have games where he has 5 or 6 catches, and then you have games where he doesn't have any. It's not entirely indicative of him, though. Some of that would absolutely just be the situation of having an offense that just doesn't cater to passing the football at high volume. It's just part of the way the cards might be dealt here. Overall prediction, I'm going to go with 40. I'm going to say he's taking that step forward from where he was in his first year at Colorado. He's also going to be inheriting an offense that has a lot of receptions to hand out. 65 from Elijhah Badger, 30 from Jalen Conyers. 95 receptions need to be handed out to varying receivers. You should definitely have Jordyn Tyson high on that list as somebody who needs to get heavily involved with the team. 60 to 65, it's what Badger's done the last 2 years. That is him inheriting the number one receiver role and thriving in the number one receiving role. You're talking about 60 to 65 catches, 1,000 to 1,100 yards. That's one of the best seasons a Sun Devils receiver has had in the last 10 years, maybe even longer than that. It is a very good season. It's a season that's so good that he might declare for the draft after this year and test the waters and see how high he can get picked. There's nothing but upside and potential here from Jordyn Tyson. But the low and the worst case scenario is he gets kind of washed in with the rest of the receivers here. You still have Xavier Giller. You still have Troy O'Mary, Melcon Stovall. Jake Smith is back in the offense now. You have tight ends, Marqueston Douglas, Shimon Mateer, and Cameron Harpel. You've got a lot of running backs who are going to factor in as well. There's 95 catches to be handed out, but that doesn't mean one guy is going to catch all of them. You could end up similar to what I said with the receiving yards, where if you have like 4 guys that have 400 receiving yards each, you're happy. That could turn into like 4 or 5 guys that each catch 25 to 30 passes. It's potentially going to be a really spread out offense, and you might not have a singular guy. You might have guys each week. Troy O'Mary could go off for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns in week 2. And then in week 3, Jake Smith catches 8 passes. And then in week 4, Jordyn Tyson goes over 100. And in week 5, it's back to O'Mary. You may not have a week-to-week receiver from the Sun Devils. This is just part of the way the offense could end up running for the team. My overall prediction, though, 40 catches, 40 to 45, I would say. I still think this is wide receiver 1. I just don't know that this is the year that you have like a Elijhah Badger on the team. It's a lot to ask from a guy. It's a lot to ask from a guy to be able to come in after not playing at all and then step into the role of a number one receiver for a guy who's done it the last 2 years with a new quarterback, with a new offense. It's a very difficult situation to throw him into. We're going to transition in the last part of the podcast. We're going to talk about the touchdown potential, the miscellaneous stats, and a little bit more. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. One more time, wherever you get your podcasts, hit like, subscribe, turn on those notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. A shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. And thanks for making us your first listen of the day. If you're teetering on the fence on deciding to hit that subscribe button on YouTube, help become the 1,000 subscriber for the channel as we get ready to hop into our 4th season covering the Sun Devils on the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Rounding out the conversation, we're going to talk about touchdowns. We're going to talk about potential yards per reception. And then we're going to talk about special teams a little bit. Touchdowns. Best case scenario, 7. And that's a shoot for the moon number. Last year, to put that in perspective, ASU threw 8 touchdowns last year. Between 4 quarterbacks, a running back, and a tight end. 6 different people threw a pass last year for the Sun Devils. You had 8 touchdown passes. Half of them came from a quarterback who was no longer here, and he did it in 3 games. Another one came from a running back. We are at ground zero for this passing game. The expectations are low. Having a guy match the total last year, which was Elijhah Badger with 3, having somebody match that is a win. Having someone double that is insane. This prediction of 7 touchdowns. This plays into, this is wide receiver 1, and this is one of the best wide receiver 1s of the last handful of years. This also plays into the offense is really able to get humming, and you get really good production out of Sam Levitt. This is everything goes right for Jordyn Tyson. This is everything goes right for the offense. It's not just the things that Jordyn Tyson can control. It's the play calling. It's the execution. It's the ability to have one-on-one matchups because the running game is so good. Or someone next to him like Troy O'Mary is able to draw away attention and give Tyson those one-on-one shots and opportunities. There's a lot that would go right for Tyson to be able to eclipse 1,000 yards and score 7 times. Worst case scenario is 0. Because last year you threw 8 touchdown passes. And 6 of them were between 2 guys, Elijhah Badger and Troy O'Mary. Jalen Conyers did not get in the end zone. Cameron Scadaboo got a very, very lucky touchdown run or reception. Xavier Guillory had a week 1 touchdown on a 47-yard 4th and 1 or 4th and whatever it was. This is an offense you're hoping is going to be better, but it doesn't guarantee that you're going to see a lot of guys score through the air. On the contrary, outside of Troy O'Mary, who I do think will build on 3 touchdown receptions last year, and we'll talk about him again tomorrow, there's no guarantee that Jordyn Tyson is able to find the end zone this year, especially if he is sporadically used. If he is a guy who only catches 20 to 25 passes, there's a chance that he's averaging 19 yards catch, or there's a chance he's averaging 10. There's not a clear-cut way to predict what Tyson can do on a very small amount of opportunity. And it could result in him not getting in the end zone. My overall prediction, I'll say 3. I'll say he matches what Elijhah Badger did last year. End of the day, this just is not going to be an offense that's going to produce through the air, in my opinion. Obviously, I've got huge projections here where I am predicting he can get 1,000 yards, but that's with everything going right. Not just the things that Tyson controls, but everything else would just have to go right for a 1,000-yard season and 7 touchdowns. 3 touchdowns, that's still a good year. That's still a good year for Tyson. He had 4 touchdowns in 8 games for Colorado a couple of years ago. It's within his realm of possibilities, and he could still end up being someone that outproduces that. And I wouldn't be surprised, but we need to set realistic expectations here. Asking a guy to come out and match a receiving total or receiving touchdown total from last year, take it and run. You get 3 touchdowns out of Tyson. It is what it is. Is it great? No. Is it terrible? Not exactly. But you're matching what you got from your number 1 receiver last year. Some miscellaneous stuff. Yards per reception. I really do think a best case scenario is right about 20. He had 21.4 in 8 games with Colorado. Sporadically used, so take it with a grain of salt. You could still see him, whether it's 50 catches or 15 catches, churn out 20 plus yards of reception because he's just that kind of a player. He's high upside. He's super explosive. I'd say anywhere between 19 and 21 is a best case scenario. Worst case, look, I could see 10 to 11. I could just in a situation where the offense gets too cute, maybe. Overall, though, I'm still going to say 14. I'm going to say the worst case scenario is 14. It's entirely possible, as Joe Rogan would say, to have a 10 to 11 yards per reception season. I personally don't think that's realistic. My overall prediction, I'm going to say 17 to 18. I'm going to say it's not quite that 20 plus because I do think there's going to be decent volume here for Tyson as a potential wide receiver 1. And he's still a big play weapon. He's still someone that can take a touch and turn it into something big and can stretch the field. And if Sam Levitt is able to push the ball down the field enough, you have a true deep threat here. That's the other thing is I think Tyson is your deep threat on this team. I'm curious if they're going to get him involved in the return game. He has that ability. He had a big punt return touchdown against Arizona State that he housed for 88 yards against ASU. He could very well do that again against ASU, or not against ASU, for ASU. Will they use him in the return game is my big question, because you've got guys that can do it. You've got Melkon Stovall had opportunities last year. Raleek Brown is coming in as a big-time weapon, as a return man. You had Elijhah Badger last year have that role as a return man, even as the number 1 receiver. And I think that Tyson should be able to slide into that role. It's not guaranteed, but I do think that Tyson is going to be one of your primary returners. I would predict that Raleek Brown is your other return man. Finally, to answer the question, can Tyson be the number 1 receiver? A lot of it's going to be based on reaching potential. Even more of it is going to be based off of the rest of the offense pulling its weight. It's going to be based off of the other wide receivers helping the offense enough so that teams can't blanket the top of the field and take away Tyson's deep ball, so that teams can't entirely base their gameplay off of eliminating number 0. It's going to be predicated off of the run game being good enough, being dynamic enough to get everything rolling and making sure that defenses are honest and that they can't just stack the box. They have to respect Sam Levitt's ability to throw the football, and they have to respect Jordyn Tyson's ability to catch the football. It's going to be predicated off of the play calling and making sure that Marcus Arroyo is an upgrade over Beau Baldwin last year, and that him and Kenny Dillingham can coexist together and call very good offenses together. There's a lot that has to go right here for Tyson to reach that high potential. Can he be wide receiver 1? Yes, he can be. But that could also look like a okay season. You don't need to be a 1,000-yard receiver to be a number 1 receiver. That was Elijhah Badger the last 2 years. You're not going to talk to a single ASU fan that would look you in the eye, honestly, and tell you, yeah, no, Elijhah Badger, not a number 1 receiver, just because he didn't have 1,000 yards. That's not realistic. That's not an argument that you can make. He was very literally wide receiver 1. He was very good wide receiver 1. He's got an NFL future. Jordyn Tyson can still be wide receiver 1, even if he's not a 1,000-yard receiver. Even if he's not a 700-yard receiver, he could still be your number 1 receiver. It's just going to be a weird offense. Rounding it out, though, best case scenario, 60 to 65 catches, 1,000 to 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns. And that's a wild season. Low, worst case scenario, 25 catches, 400 yards, 0 touchdowns. That to me is more realistic than the best case scenario. But again, best case scenario is everything goes right. Overall prediction, I'm going to say about 35 to 40 catches for about 700 yards, 3 touchdowns. It's not a mind-blowing season, but you're matching what you have been able to get. And that's a win at the end of the day for an offense that is going through as much change and turnover as it has been going through. I also think that this is going to be one of your primary return guys, and I'll go and make a bold prediction. He's got a chance to be all conference as a return specialist. Hopefully he can do it as a wide receiver as well. But I want to know what you guys think. Am I crazy with these predictions? Am I right on the money? What are your predictions? Let me know in the comments. You can hit me up on Twitter at RichieBrads36 or the podcast at LO_Sun Devils, wherever you're getting your shows, though. Hit like, hit subscribe, turn on notifications wherever you get your podcasts. I appreciate you guys for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. And a shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Once again, if you have not subscribed on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Help us get to 1,000 subscribers before the season starts. I will be sure, if we are able to hit that goal and hit that milestone, I'll come up with something to do to celebrate that. I don't know. We can experiment around, maybe an ice bucket challenge, maybe something crazy. I don't know. But help us get to that number. Now's never been a better time to subscribe to the podcast. We'll be keeping you up to date. We'll be back again tomorrow to talk about Troy O'Mary. I'll see you there. Till then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.